Hi everybody, it's Christina Wallace and this is Biology 232, Human Anatomy Physiology Lab, and today we're going to talk about exercises 32A and 32B, which is all about blood vessels. 32A is going to talk about anatomy of blood vessels and histology, and then there is a goldfish tail experiment that we'll look at. And then 32B is basically listing all the vessel names that you need to know and the order of flow. So you're going to be tracing a drop of blood from one location to another. So your online lab report instructions give you some useful information. Please read them. First off, they're going to take you to a histology view of an artery versus a vein, and I'll show you that on slides. Then farther down, this is the portion that talks about the goldfish experiment. And this video that's listed right here is a cool, pretty relaxing video of blood passing through vessels in the goldfish tail. But I want you to notice that there is another video in your lab report, which I'll show you in just a second. Use this one first because it's actually showing you the experiment in progress. So what they do to the goldfish, how they take it out, how they put it under the scope, and then they actually look at the real live goldfish under a scope. And that's the one that's listed in your lab report. And so while I'm showing you that, I'm just going to talk about the goldfish stuff and then we'll move on to the vessels. And so it kind of, please read through these instructions. They talk about, important information about sympathetic and parasympathetic innervation. And then as you go on, there is a video listed right here. This is the one that you should watch that goes over all of the steps of the actual goldfish experiment. And then lower down, Professor Patterson asks you some questions and he gives you the results. And so what we're doing in this experiment basically is we're looking at these three naturally occurring neurotransmitters or hormones, and then looking at what effect they have on vasodilation and vasoconstriction. And so acetylcholine is the rest and digest hormone. We have ACH receptors all over our body. And then epinephrine and norepinephrine are our fight or flight chemicals. So then down here we have three artificial substances that humans take into their bodies, and what we're doing is we're trying to understand how similar or different these are to either our fight or flight hormones or our rest and digest hormones. And so I've added a couple of questions that might help you here. So when you drink alcohol, what happens when you drink alcohol? What happens to the color of your face? Does that give you any clue? That's kind of mimicking what their results were. Are they mellower or amped up? I ask that to kind of draw these contrasts between parasympathetic and sympathetic. Caffeine, what happens when you drink caffeine? Does it amp you? Does it mellow you? We saw vasoconstriction there. Does it mimic more the fight or flight chemicals or the rest and digest chemicals? And then nicotine, same thing. I'll let you guys think about that. That's what they're asking you there. And please remember that this chart down at the bottom is very useful. And so if you go down here and you see an increase in vasoconstriction, then all this other stuff is happening. If you see an increase in vasodilation, then all the rest of that stuff goes with that. So this chart should be very useful to answering the questions above. All right, so back to blood vessels. Here we have a picture of an artery and a vein. The artery and the vein have three tunics. So there's kind of three overarching layers, and each layer is going to have a couple things in it, and we'll get to that in the next slide. So understand what components make up each layer Some of them have more than one thing, some of them don't. So understand the components of the layers. And then, if you're having to tell an artery from a vein, look for a couple of things. And so the first thing that you want to look for is the shape of the lumen. Arteries have a really round lumen, and it's because they have a lot of muscle tissue in their tunica media. So this is tunica media right there. And it's bouncy and has elastic fibers, and it's a high pressure system, so the lumen stays really round. So round lumen equals artery. This one, as you can see, has a way different shape. It's flat and has kind of little corners in it and stuff. That is a vein. So any shape that's odd or flat is typically a vein. Thickness of the tunica media. And so that's this muscular layer right here. And so in an artery, it's going to be much thicker. And in a vein, it's going to be much skinnier, like that. So comparing the thickness of tunica media. Presence of internal elastic lamina. This is part of tunica intima. And it's this squiggly black phone cord looking thing. So this squiggly thing that's going around, that's black. That's internal elastic lamina. And it allows for constriction and dilation of the endothelium on the inside lining of your blood vessels. And then the second thing, or the last thing to look at, is thickness of tunica adventitia. So adventitia is the outer wrapping, and so it's going to be all of this dense irregular connective tissue kind of on the outside, this stuff. And this one has a whole bunch of it. So veins generally have more, tunica adventitia than arteries. In comparison, like the ratio of muscle tissue, smooth muscle in tunica media to the dense irregular connective tissue of the tunica adventitia. There'll be way more tunica adventitia in a vein compared to its muscle layer. And so here we can see kind of architecturally those tunics that I was just talking about. So from here up, we have tunica intima. And so it's going to be the epithelial lining and then a little bit of basement membrane that the epithelial or endothelial lining sticks to, and the internal elastic lamina. See, on this side, on the vein, there is no internal elastic lamina. So that is a defining characteristic for an artery. And that is that layer right there, part of the tunica intima, that curly phone cord looking thing. The next layer down is the muscle layer. So all of this is tunica media. Tunica media, the muscle layers. And then on the outside, all of this stuff is tunica adventitia. So all of that stuff, this layer, tunica adventitia. So on the front page of your lab report, you're asked to kind of compare and contrast those. You're asked to talk about what each tunic has, what it's made out of, what kind of tissue type it is. So remember, intima, we're going to see some sort of epithelium. Media, we're going to see smooth muscle. And adventitia, we're going to see dense irregular connective tissue. So you can answer the rest of that. Think about their differences. We just talked about those. Yeah. So that's pretty much it for 32A. So the next part of your lab report is 32B. And this is where you're learning the names of all the vessels. And so I draw your attention to, we're going to be looking mostly at systemic. We kind of learned pulmonary circulation when we talked about the heart, right? And so systemic circulation. And so I just want to draw your attention to a couple of definitions. if this is really important, this green highlighted piece, and so if there's only one of them vessels, it's a period, lowercase a period, and if there are paired vessels, it is a dot a dot. And so that's what I have highlighted here. Plural means vessels are paired. There's one on the right side and one on the left side, and singular means there's really just one. So Michael has given you a really great example. This is the kind of information we are looking for. That simple. Don't overthink it. On page 8, this is the place where we see those questions about tributaries. And so I have written out an explanation here for tributaries for the splenic vein and the superior mesenteric vein. So a tributary vein is a smaller vein that drains into a bigger vein. And so the splenic vein is a tributary of the superior mesenteric vein, and the inferior mesenteric vein is a tributary of the splenic vein. And so please see page 756 in your textbook. It does a nice job of explaining that. And then all of these things feed into the hepatic portal vein that takes that dirty blood from your gut into your liver to be filtered before it goes back to the heart. I'm not going to spend a ton of time going over every vessel in your slides. I'll go over some pictures, but I want to draw your attention to a really great reference. There are 2 videos listed here. One is a talking motion vessel model picture or video where they're actually someone's walking you through the flat vessel model, which you will see pictures of on an exam. And that's okay, but I really, really, really like this one. It's the vessel model pictures with no sound but labels. And so it's basically, they just go area by area, and they show you the area, and then they draw an arrow to a vessel, and then they put the name. And it's just really useful. So that's the one I would spend your time on. If you want to watch the first vessel video, this one, to kind of figure out what we're talking about when we talk about the flat guy model, that's fine, but this one is really stellar in my opinion. And then the last part of your lab report has you tracing blood from one place in the heart, or from one place in the body back to the heart into another place. And so the very first time you do one, you have to go through the heart. And so you have to list all the chambers, valves, and vessels that the blood passes through, just like we did in the heart lab. So this is just a review of that. Once you do that one time, you just write heart afterwards. You don't have to go through all the vessels, valves, and chambers again. And this is the format I want you to write your pathways. I want you to write vessel name, and then it goes into the next thing and to the next thing, etc. You don't have to write sentences, just write one vessel to the next vessel to the next vessel. And I'll show you that in your lab report. So here we are at the vessel tracing stuff. And so here's the first one right here, right side of face to the left thumb. And so on this one, you're going to go from the face back to the heart through veins. Then you're going to list all the vessels, valves, and chambers of the heart. Then you're going to go out through the arteries to the left thumb. And I've just kind of drawn an example of, I started that process for you. So that's what I want it to look like. If you write sentences and stuff, it's just way too hard for me to grade, and it'll make me grumpy, and I might, I might be less inclined to give you credit if I am grumpy. So that's the preferred format. So right toe to small intestine. So you have to get from your right toe back to your heart in veins. Then you'll go through the heart. Just put heart. Then you're going to go out through arteries to the small intestine. So this is just practicing what vessel feeds what area and what vessel drains what area. And so then right kidney to the stomach, you go from your right kidney back to your heart in veins, then out through arteries to your stomach. And then the last one, number 4, it's a little tricky because there's 2 pathways. It's, you know. And so I've shown you where in your book you can see this labeled. And so you just have a couple possible pathways. And so it'll be kind of a path to a thing, and then there'll be a path to another thing, and they'll both come together into a thing. That's all we're talking about there. And again, this video of just the pictures without the sound and with labels is just excellent review of all the blood vessels. And because it's so good, I'm going to show you some slides with blood vessels on them, but I'm not going to trace every single thing because you have a video already doing that. All right, so here we are. These are the kind of pictures you would see if you are labeling these vessels. And so brachiocephalic, remember brachiocephalic trunk was one of the things that came off the aortic arch. Common carotids, one came off aortic arch and one came off brachiocephalic trunk. Vertebral artery is this little squiggly one that goes up through the vertebrae right there. That's vertebral. Internal and external carotid are right here, and so internal is the back one, external is the front one. If they just tell you only external is visible on the model, I will take that too. It's okay. They say that only one is visible on the model in the video. It's fine. I won't parse that point. Facial arteries, facial arteries, that makes sense. Axillary artery. So oh, I forgot subclavian on this list. So the first thing we're going to have is subclavian under our clavicle, right? And then axillary is going to be in our armpit. And then brachial is going to be going down our arm. So, sorry. Subclavian is the blue, axillary is the yellow, and brachial is the black. Radial ulnar go down our arm. So which one is on the lateral side? It's the, oops, sorry, dang it. Undo, pen. Cursor, get rid of my thing, pen. All right, so lateral side is radial and medial side is ulnar arteries. In our abdomen, off of our descending aorta, so we are below the diaphragm, so we are on our descending aorta, our abdominal aorta. The first sprig you're going to come off is the first thing you're going to see is the celiac trunk. And so that is this little stub that has 3 things coming off of it. So you have your abdominal aorta, and then you have kind of a tube coming off with 3 little branches. That is celiac trunk. Celiac trunk. And then all the 3 things that come off of it are here. And so you're going to have the hepatic artery going to the liver. You're going to have the splenic artery going to the spleen, and you're going to have the gastric artery going to the left side of the stomach. Continuing on down, you have renal arteries, you have superior mesenteric, inferior mesenteric, and then once our abdominal aorta splits into a V, these are common iliac arteries. So I just want to remind you, every time a vessel branches, if that same tube keeps continuing down, it gets a new name. And so where we learned our common iliac artery is right there, once we get the branch of our internal iliac going inside to feed our pelvis, the leftover stuff, as that tube progresses down, is going to get a new name. So that one is external iliac, whereas this little squiggle in here is internal iliac. And then the area above it is common iliac. So our external iliac becomes our femoral artery going down our leg, and then once it goes, it kind of swings back behind. You can see right here where it's going behind, it's going deep to the posterior side of the body. And so when it goes behind our knee, it becomes the popliteal artery, because that's the popliteal region. So our popliteal artery continues down, so it's in the back of our knee. The first branch coming off is going to be the anterior tibial artery, and it says it's going to the front of the leg right there, anterior tibial. And so once we have anterior tibial branched off, the rest of that tube is going to be posterior tibial. And then we're going to get one more. Yes. I forgot an artery on here. I forgot one. I'm so sorry. Let's see, what color do I want to make it? Fibular. So this right here, the green one, is the fibular. And so this needs to get added right there. Fibular artery. Don't forget that. I forgot to put it in this list. And so fibular artery is the green one. It's on the lateral side of the posterior leg, right down your fibula. Posterior tibial is the main yellow artery going down that's going to feed into the dorsalis pedis. Dorsalis pedis, no, I don't want that. I want another color. Dorsalis pedis is like this one right here and on the top of your foot. Dorsalis pedis. Sorry, I forgot the fibular artery. And that's pretty much the arteries. And so here we have the veins draining. You have internal jugular. Internal jugular is the big one right here. External jugular is this one that's farther out. External jugular. So this is external. And then I'll do a different color. This is internal jugular. Facial veins, okay, that makes pretty much easy sense. Same thing as facial arteries. Vertebral veins, same thing, going down through the vertebrae, through those transverse foramina of your cervical vertebrae. And subclavian, I'll do that in blue. Subclavian is going to be this arc underneath of the clavicle. So now we're going to talk about how the arm drains back into the subclavian vein. And so I'm always kind of heading towards the heart when I talk about veins, and I'm always heading away from the heart and about supplying things when I talk about arteries. So what drains into the subclavian vein? All of your arm arteries. And so the first thing I want to draw your attention to is there are some deep arteries and there are some superficial arteries. Your arm has lots of, I said arteries, I meant veins. There are some deep veins and there are some superficial veins. So the deep veins of your arm are the main ones. So they're the ones that are kind of hidden and ghosty, the ones that are kind of going down the middle. These ghosty looking veins are the deep ones. And so that's where we're going to see brachial, radial, and ulnar. Those are all going to be deep. Okay, then we have some superficial veins where generally people who are taking your blood are taking them from the superficial veins. And so now we'll look at those. And so you have a cephalic vein that goes way up here into axillary, and it's on the lateral side of your arm. And then you have a basilic vein, which goes down the, sorry, I wanted to get a new color there. Come on, new color there. That goes down the medial side of your arm. And then in between those, there's going to be the median cubital. And they're going to feed into the axillary, which is in the armpit region. So this region right here. So this vein right there, axillary vein. How we drain the leg. One of the veins in the leg that doesn't really have an arterial counterpart at all is the great saphenous vein. And that vein is the longest vein in your body, and it's one that they harvest to do coronary bypasses with. And so that's this vein right here that I'm tracing in yellow. Longest vein in your body, great saphenous vein. Great saphenous vein, yellow. Medial to the thigh, medial to the calf. Anterior tibial, all of these are gonna just mimic the arteries. And so we've seen all of these before. Anterior tibial is the first branch that will drain into the popliteal, right? Posterior tibial is the rest of that big tibial vein that's kind of draining from your dorsalis pedis. And once again, I forgot fibular. I don't know what I did today to forget the fibular vein. Anyway, and remember this fibular vein is the second one, so fibular veins. Lateral side on the fibula. And they're all going to drain into the popliteal vein, which is behind your knee, and those are going to drain into the femoral vein, which goes up your leg. So this is femoral vein, more medial, and this is great saphenous vein. Almost done. All right, so your femoral vein is going to drain into the external iliac, which we can see a little bit of external iliac right here. And then we can see the internal iliac right here. Internal iliac, green, draining the pelvis. External iliac, yellow, draining from the femoral vein. Common iliacs, pink. Common iliac, pink. They're all going to drain into the inferior vena cava. Inferior vena cava. We can see our renal veins right here and right here, right? And then our hepatic portal vein. I want you guys to look at the video for this stuff, because I think they do a really nice job of explaining that, and I don't think this model or the picture I have available talks about this. And please see page 756 in your textbook to kind of understand the tributaries. Like this is a tributary of splenic, and then splenic is a tributary of superior mesenteric, and they all feed into the hepatic portal vein. All right, and that's it. I have talked for way too long, and I'll see you next week. Thanks.